Hello, my name is Natalie. I have a 10-year-old profoundly deaf son, Mac. I'm going to talk to you tonight about my journey with him. All parents advocate for their children, hearing or deaf. Advocacy is something I've had to become good at. Mac was born with cytomegalovirus, a virus I contracted whilst pregnant. This is the cause of his deafness. Mac had multiple issues at birth. At the time, deafness was the least of our concern. Being involved at PMH Early Intervention Program, we were steered in the direction of cochlear implant surgery. I remember not feeling comfortable about the surgery, especially after using Dr. Google. After the implant, we had to make a decision to either use telephone speech and hearing or WADE at the time. Both have wonderful audiologists, speechies, teachers of the deaf and support staff. In the end, the decision was purely based on the fact that TSH had better swings. In hindsight, Mac was more suited to WADE as he needed a total communication approach. Mac started kindy at our local mainstream school with the support of an interpreter. Mac was overwhelmed, isolated and unhappy, so we moved him to the Mosman Park School for Deaf Children. Here, he is well supported by deaf role models, interpreters and specialised teaching staff. Here, he has developed relationships with other deaf children. Here, it's not only part of the deaf community, he has an extended family. Here, deaf kids can. Deaf education is something I'm passionate about because I'd like to see more deaf adults achieve, be successful and live their lives without limitations. I encourage Mac to be involved in community sports, for example, football, soccer, baseball, swimming and karate. He participates here through the support of an interpreter. Funding for this is probably where I've had to have my best advocacy hat on, as NDIS is not in my area as yet. So I've learnt to stretch the funding through educating the coaches, using more facial expression, teaching the signs which are specific to the game, and also purchasing a visual board. I learnt not to mention that Mac was deaf prior to enrolment, as I've experienced some negativity around that. So I now allow him to trial at the club, then explain he's deaf, and he'll be supported by an interpreter. I also invited a coder, or a child of a deaf adult, to address the team and the parents and all the coaching staff there on deaf awareness. Something as simple as this makes a world of difference to Mac. As a working mum, I also need to access vacation care during school holidays. Very few places will accept Mac due to his communication mode, so I found it best to approach the organisation in person. After introducing them to Mac, they can see how engaging he is without a voice. So I had a deaf role model visit the Vacation Care Centre to teach the staff some signs which were relevant to his needs whilst he was there. Mac makes allowances for those who find it difficult to communicate with him. He's extremely resourceful and adapts well to most environments, although it is important for me to set it up for him so he can thrive. I enrolled in TAFE to study Auslan full-time in 2015. I notified my employer explaining the importance of my need to learn Auslan. My roster was altered to accommodate my TAFE commitments. I intended to both work and study, which I did until management changed, and therefore so did my work-study agreement. Auslan was my first priority, as was my son. At first I felt I didn't have the strength to deal with yet another challenge, and then my sense of justice kicked in and I dug deeper and fought for the right to remain employed and be able to learn my son's language. This was a long and stressful and very unnecessary process. I nearly gave up several times. But then one day on holiday in Broome, I was swimming with my family when a man approached me as he'd noticed we were signing, and he was interested in Auslan. We chatted for some time. Unbeknownst to me, this man was one of Australia's most high-profile lawyers. Hence, I'm still employed today, all thanks to Auslan. I refuse to accept that my son will be forever dependent just because he's deaf. I'm determined to make sure that he succeeds academically and socially. As a parent of a deaf child, I think we all advocate, even when we're not advocating, it just becomes part of who you are as a person. Most importantly, as parents, we need to teach our deaf children how to advocate for themselves. If we empower deaf people from a young age, the benefits will be phenomenal. Thank you.